Hello and welcome to another trigger tutorial. This one is going to cover the use of the scheduler. Now the scheduler thankfully is a little bit more straightforward than events that we covered in the last video, and it is more of a niche system which is not at all required for map making, but in some situations it can make certain operations a little easier. Let's have a quick look at a basic use of it. So let's go into the triggers and I'll add in the usual trigger loader. And let's take a look at the scheduler. So if I click on new trigger and let's start. The scheduler effectively allows you to make an operation occur at some time in the future and with the option to repeat it. And so you'll see here that there is a delay option. You've then got a boolean as to whether it should repeat. There is a variable that will be set based on the number of times it has iterated. And finally, there's an option to run immediately. Now, this doesn't really make much sense other than cases where you're looping. And the run immediately basically allows you for the first iteration to ignore the timer that you have put on there and execute what you're going to have straight away and then do stuff on delay. Let's have a quick example. So we have a start and let's do grant God power. Oops. Let's see, God power grant to a player. And we'll just do a bronze. And we'll just grant one short. And then we need to end the scheduler. End. So we've got the scheduler, we save, I've got bronze starts, and we'll end it. Let's give this a run. And there you see, after 1 second, we got a bronze granted. Okay, what about a case of looping? Well, the first option you've got is to simply do a loop straight away, so let's just show that. So if I put repeat to be on and launch, you'll see that it will grant continuously now. And then probably the other main type of loop you'll want to do is a counting loop. And for a counting loop, there is something called a set repeat. So what you can do is say that it is not repeating, and then we can add a scheduler with a set repeat. Now we'll use a free text version so that we can type in a custom thing to do. The non-free text version is mostly useful when you are using conditional effects and you want it to repeat on a condition, and you'll probably use the non-free text version. But here, what we want to do is say grant it an X number of times. Now, if you recall back on the start, there is a iteration variable called iteration. We can use that to customize how many times we want it to happen. So if we say iteration is less than 3, then it will repeat until the iteration number becomes 3. This now should grant it 3 times. One, two, 3. So that's a very basic use of the scheduler. Before I move on to a more advanced version, I'm just going to quickly cover an alternative version of the scheduler called the unit scheduler. The unit scheduler allows you to run effects in the future, similar to the normal scheduler, but on specific units. And so I'm going to give an example where we're going to poison some units using this scheduler. So let's just put some right. So let's say you've cast some kind of power on the enemy, and now you want those enemies to be poisoned and slowly take damage until they die. Let's show you an example of that. So if we go to Unit Scheduler, we can use that. So Unit Scheduler Start, we can select these units. You'll notice as with effects there is the by ID version, which you can use for, let's say you've got the unit creation handler and you want all new units to have something scheduled onto it. You can use that to do that. But in this case, we're just going to apply directly. And let's put a small delay in of 250 milliseconds. Let's have it start immediately and loop, sorry. We will have it as a unit ID variable, which we're going to want to use, and then let's do a percent damage on the units. I never find it. I think it's at the bottom, isn't it? Unit damage by percentage by ID, and we will put our unit ID in, and we'll just do a 1% damage to represent that poison acting in. And similar to the other scheduler, we need to end it. So let's just end. There we go. So we've got the start, we've got our units, we've got a delay, we've got a have it happen immediately and repeat, and we're going to damage our units. And as a note, as you're probably noticing with these, we're not looping it because the scheduler itself handles the looping. You send it off once and the scheduler occurs. So in case you're thinking, oh, do I need to be looping this trigger similar to the one? No, you don't. You just do it once and it will handle everything for you. And there we go. You can see that our Anibites are taking poison damage and losing 1% of the health every quarter of a second, which will result in them very shortly having their demise. As with any of the other effects, you can use conditional effects inside to customize the behavior further. And yeah, produce some interesting effects. Now, let's take an actual, perhaps more useful use of the scheduler. An example I'm going to look at is spawning waves of units. Take this scenario. We have a Cyrus and a temple that we want to protect. Let's have a quick look at the existing triggers, which I have done a partial dummy template of. We've got our usual initialize, which just does the trigger loader. We've got a reveal, where I just simply use the temple and give it a big line of sight so we can see the entire map and what is going on. And then we're going to look at the basic spawn. Here I have done it by an event. So I've created a parameter which is going to say a string as to what unit to create. So in this case we're going to have a Minotaur created. And here I've populated some parameters. The first parameter is the delay of how long we want before the unit spawns. This one represents how many to spawn, and this is the delay between spawns. This will then fire our spawn, which our handler will look at. Now, you might be thinking, okay, and I'll come to it later, what is this scope start and scope end? So scope is something that I've added in, and what it does is you can wrap a set of trigger effects such that anything you declare inside doesn't carry outside. And you might think, okay, what's the point of that? Well, here I create a parameters with some stuff in. Now, if I wanted to create another spawn, I can copy all these down, let's say like that, and I don't have to rename the variable because they're in separate scopes. Otherwise, I'd have to declare a new variable or reuse the same parameters variable although at the moment I don't even support reusing parameter variables. So at the moment, this would be the easiest way to do that. Anyway, that is a little bit of a sidetrack. Let's have a look at what's going on so far. And you'll see, oh, the minotaurs spawned immediately, and they are running towards the center. Why didn't the stuff work? Well, the reason being is that I haven't actually coded up all the logic of the spawning, and that is what we're going to do using the scheduler. If I take a look at the handler so far, you'll see that I grab all the data out, the unit, the time, the count, and the delay, and I just simply spawn immediately the units at the locations. That is because without the scheduler, there is no easy way to have a trigger do stuff in the future. And that is why we're going to need the scheduler to help us out. Without the scheduler, you would have to have some kind of looping trigger that you would have to activate and then spawn the units and then keep track of how many you had spawned so far and then deactivate the trigger. It gets incredibly complicated. But with the scheduler, which we're going to go through and try now, this should be a lot easier. So the first thing we want to do is to introduce delay into the unit spawning, because at the moment the units are spawning immediately. So let's start with that. So if we create a scheduler, and we're going to want the start, and here we have the time before we want the time before the first spawn. Now here I ended up calling it time, so let's call it that. We want it to not repeat because we just want the whole thing to occur once, and we want it to occur at the time that it is after the delay, so we don't want to have the fire immediate. So let's just put everything up. We're going to want to end, so let's put the schedule ending in. Oops, that's the unit scheduler one. I just noticed. There we go. I'll just move that up. Now the time hasn't been obtained until further below in the code, so we're going to need to move that up. Oops. So let's just have a quick look at that. So we've got our start, spawn with the parameters. We're going to grab the first parameter out, which is the time that we want the spawn to occur at, and then we're going to schedule so that the code below runs only after the time has occurred, and then we're going to grab our unit out and count, and we're just going to spawn and end. So let's just see if the delay that we have put in works. And we messed up. So let's have a quick look at what we did wrong. If we go back to spawn handler, we have done a spawn with the parameters. We done an int. Yes, we didn't do the parameters version. So because of the discussion we had earlier about closures and the use of parameters, variables that are on the outside, such as the parameters here, are not getting inside of the parameters. So we need to change this schedule to be using the parameters version so that we can pass the parameters through. Parameters start, and yeah, we want to put our time in. I think everything else is okay. Here's our parameters that we're going to pass through, and initial state, repeat state no, iteration, and no fire immediately. Let's just run that through, and hopefully now it should work. There we go. So a short time is passing, and then we have our minotaur spawning. So that's good. That's one step forward to what we want. Now we want to introduce our spawning delay between the individual units to make it look a little bit more natural. Well, let's go and sort that out. So let's go to the effects. And similarly, we're going to want another parameter start. So let's do that. We can just duplicate the existing one and move it up. Now, in here, we want it to be the delay between each spawn. I believe I called that delay, so let's put that in. Now, we want it to loop, but we want it to loop a certain number of times. Now, we already covered that right at the start when we were doing the bronzes, so let's do the same trick here. So let's do scheduler and do the repeat. We want the free text version, and we'll just move that up a little bit. And because we're going to need a delay, and the count, let's move both of those up as well. Oops. And delay, because yeah, as I say, we've put our scheduler in, and then inside the scheduler we want to then do the individual spawns with a delay, which is what this one is doing. So then we've got our count, and we want it to repeat, so we'll do the same trick before. So iteration, oops, iteration is less than count, so it'll repeat until the count is hit. And then we grab the unit and spawn. Now at the moment we're spawning all the units at once. We need to change that so it spawns them only one at a time. So we need to remove count here and change that to 1 instead. And we need to end the inner schedule. Let's just have a quick recap of what's going on, because I realised I was jumping around a little bit and it might have been a little confusing. So we start with the event handler. We take which we call spawn, which is what our basic spawn is firing. We spawn with some parameters that gives information about what it is that we're going to spawn and when. We grab the 0th index parameter, which is our time. This is the time that we want the spawn to actually occur at. And so we're going to say that we want that spawn to occur in the future. So we've got our time. We want the whole thing to run once, so we just have a single run. We then grab the delay out of the parameters, which is going to be the time between spawning each of the individual units at the location. In there, we're going to run our scheduler, our inner schedule, which is going to repeat. And when it repeats, we're going to want to grab our count out, and that's going to say how many times it's going to do. So I said that it doesn't repeat in the schedule here because we're going to override the behavior anyway with the set repeat. And then we're going to grab our unit out that we want to spawn, and then we're going to spawn at the locations 1 unit and then move it towards the middle. And same with the other one. And then we're going to end our schedulers and end our event handling. So let's see if this works. So 3 seconds go by, and then we'll have our units quickly spawning in and moving towards the middle on a and let's just show that how easy it is to reuse the system. So if we go back into our basic spawn, let's add another wave of enemies. So all we need to do is duplicate these bits here. And let's change what the unit is. Let's change that from Minotaur to Anubite. Oops. There we go. And we want them to spawn a little bit later. So let's say 10 seconds in, and let's say only 5 of them spawn, and we'll change the delay on that. So now we should hopefully get a second wave of enemies. That will occur after the first set. So here is our first wave of enemies, of Minotaurs, coming to cause destruction on our temple. Take him out no problem. And our Anabites don't seem to be working. Let's have a quick look as to what I might have messed up. Probably mistyped something, causing a problem. So let's go to our spawn. So, yep, I mistyped Anubite, which was a little silly. I put an R on the end. Unfortunately, that is a disadvantage, that sometimes you can mistype things and cause problems. Hopefully you can demonstrate that this demonstrates that you do have to be a little bit careful with these advanced triggers. Hopefully most of the time you can quickly figure out what the problem might be. There you go, you can see the Anabites are now spawning in a attack wave. And that hopefully gives you a overview on the scheduler. So to recap, the scheduler is something that you perform once, it goes away, and then you can run some code in the future after a given delay. And then there are options to repeat that code. You've seen that the schedulers can be stacked and nested inside of each other in order to have different things run. So in the example we have here, we were wanting to do attack wave and have the actual units of the attack wave spawn after delays one at a time in order to make the spawning a little bit more natural. So we stacked and nested up the event schedulers, the first one to delay when the spawning should start, and then the second inner schedule is a delay between each individual unit spawning. But hopefully from that you can see that the scheduler doesn't provide anything new that you couldn't already do with triggers, but hopefully makes doing certain things like these attack waves a whole lot easier. And as you saw, you can combine with other systems like the events in order to simplify things down even further. Until then, I'll see you in the next trigger tutorial. See you all.